Now, welcome back. Let's get into our first conversation on this episode of Breakfast Central, and it takes us to Lagos. Now, in Nigeria, the Lagos State House of Assembly has passed the Unlawful Societies and Cultism Prohibition Bill 2020 into law. The bill, which has punishments for parents of convicted cultists as one of its components, was passed during plenary session earlier this week. Now, during a debate on the bill in August 2020, some members faulted the bill that existed then, saying that it does not meet the security needs of the state, hence the amendment. Now, the bill, when signed into law by Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, will provide for the prohibition of unlawful societies and cultism in Lagos State and for connected purposes. Now, one may ask, punishment for parents of a cultist. And our guest is Ifeoma Ben. She is a principal partner, Eminence Solicitors this morning. Welcome, Ifeoma, for joining us on Breakfast Central.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. So let's get straight to what is probably the most controversial aspect of the bill, and that is where the bill may punish the parents of convicted cultists. No, so Ifeoma, tell us, legally, is this even possible?
Okay, thank you for that question. In the first place, there are laws that has to provide for circumstances where one will be convicted for an offense. And it's either you are committing the offense, you are aiding the commission of that offense. So looking at it on the first level, because you are a parent, then the Unlawful Societies and Cultism Prohibition Law now says you are going to be convicted of an offense of cultism. So we are going to analyze it critically. Is it lawful? Is it consistent with the provisions of the law and of the Nigerian laws generally, and also in particular, is that particular law constitutional in itself? So now, we will not just say that because you are a parent, you are now guilty of an offense. First of all, we have to analyze whether you aided the commission of that offense. So by mere fact that you gave birth to a child and the child then is behaving and is involved in cultism does not in itself make you guilty of an offense under Nigerian laws. So that particular provision has to be critically examined and brought into context. In what context will the parent or guardian or whoever is in charge of the person who committed the offense of cultism be guilty of that offense? So it will not just be general, it has to be narrowed down under a particular context in order for it to be lawful. Otherwise, it will be unlawful.
Okay.
All right. So if I suppose lots of thought still has to go into this bill because it just says in the end that, parents of the convicted. So until the child or the minor is convicted, then particularly the parents are still perhaps free to go. But I need to ask you this. There were concerns raised by members of the House during the second reading of this bill that it should not be limited to schools. That cultism extends into society as well. The likes of Rotimi Alao cited an example of one of the fraternities, on the 8th day of celebration held in the constituency, which led to the destruction of, property in the area. He equally alleged that some police officers, which is quite damning, were even in the, some of these cult groups. So was this concern captured in the bill, do you think?
Yes, I agree with that position. Looking at the previous law that is that we are seeking to amend, that the Lagos State House of Assembly is seeking to amend, and which has been passed, though have not been signed into law.
Yes.
You look at it and see that it is more or less limited to institutions. And looking at the realities of the environment we are in, we'll see that it is not just those who are in school that are into cultism. There are various times that we've had to go to courts to maybe represent those who are guilty or who are charged for cultism, you see that they are not just students. So there are people in various communities in Lagos where cultism is actually the order of the day. So it is very important that it is all embracive. It should go beyond the institution and not just those in the institution, because there are other areas also that ought to be covered. So I agree with that proposition that it should be extended to the society, not just the institution.
All right, so we just saw the picture of the Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly, Mudashiru Obasa, and he has said that there was a need to differentiate among the various types of cultism in the country so that they don't solve one problem and then end up creating another problem. So, Ifeoma, what do you think in terms of the punishments that the bill is proposing for offenders and the criteria that's being used to arrive at them? What are these punishments that the bill is looking at?
Okay, in respect of what the speaker said, it's also good to categorize all this, define what cultism is in the real sense, and know what it covers, the scope. And on that point, when he said during the time that we are going to pass the bill, he said that they are going to really give the scope or the categories of cultism. And that is also very important, because if it is not properly defined and what it covers is not properly defined, then it might also constitute another issue, because it will be vague. Then in respect of the penalties or the punishment, yes, there are various penalties provided depending on who is involved, whether the person who is aiding the commission of the offense or the actual person who committed the offense. So these penalties, looking at it, they are geared towards trying to prevent the commission of this offense. So we also have to look at it critically, the extent of the involvement of the person. Did the person actually commit this offense? And what role did the person play in commission of the offense? So these are the things that will also be determined in trying to look at the categories of or the types of cultism like they are trying to propose. So the penalties will really be such that would deter persons who would ordinarily want to commit that offense, but because they see that, okay, imprisonment, if you are given an imprisonment without an option of fine, then and you must serve the jail term for the prescribed period, be it 5 years, 10 years, as the case may be, or 3 years, as the case may be. You would now stay for that period in prison without an option of fine. Then that would also deter a lot of people from engaging in acts that would constitute cultism. So the prescribed punishment must be able to deter people from further commission of that offense.
Well, talking about retribution, punishment and retribution, but I need to ask you this, Ifeoma. One of the speakers that's talking about Yinka Ogundimo, now he pointed out that cultism is now even rampant in primary schools, strangely, you have to say. He said that while looking into the punishment of those found guilty, rehabilitation of minors who belong to these, gold groups should be looked into. Now, does this bill provide for that rehabilitation of, members of these societies?
That's an aspect that ought to be considered. Actually, the earlier bill does not provide for that. But in this new bill that they are trying to amend, they are trying the amendment bill, they are looking at various issues that will really make the new law very comprehensive and address all issues. So that was where that issue of the primary school children being involved in cultism coming up. So when the issue of primary school children comes up in this regard, then the rehabilitation, because most of them are minors. So you wouldn't ordinarily, the punishment that would be meted out to someone who is an adult who is in the higher institution would ordinarily not be meted out to a primary school pupil, because the person might still not be up to the age of being convicted of an offense. So a proper thing is to also make a special provision, look into that law to make sure that it analyzes that aspect and makes adequate provision for that rehabilitation. It was mentioned during that reading, and it also be properly done in the way that what we are trying to prevent will really be addressed totally. Because primary school pupils we will be given special consideration in respect of that rehabilitation. So that's a very critical issue that has to be analyzed. And we know that this law, though having been passed into law, has not been signed, has not been given the assent of the government, which is also another aspect of it.
Okay, Ifeoma, we're going to let you go, but very quickly, there are those who are actually questioning how far this bill can go in addressing the issue. We've heard that Nigerian politicians sometimes sponsor cults for their own purposes. We have to look at how cults are even getting weapons when it comes to these issues. We're seeing cult clashes in neighborhoods that don't have to do with certain things. We also have to look at our society. Unemployment is high. Education and healthcare are poor. Many parents are struggling. So before we even get to convicting the cultists, do you think we've done enough work in addressing why young boys and girls actually join cults in the first place? We're seeing cult activities in primary school, Ifeoma. I don't know if that doesn't scare anybody else. It actually scares me because you think of what happens when these children grow up and join society as adults. So very quickly, before we get to the law, are we as a society actually addressing why we're seeing our young boys and young girls in cults?
Okay, the root cause of the problem also needs to be looked into. The society is not doing enough. The government also needs to do much more in order to prevent the commission of this offense, because most of these people are jobless. They take to the streets, they take corn and harass people on the way, take away their things, and even in schools, they want to really feel like the big boys and all that. And in respect of the sponsorship, that also has to be looked into, because if the politicians or some other people in government or some other people in the society, maybe the big people, now sponsor the younger ones and give them guns, they should be held liable as aiding the commission of the offense. So that will be part of the ways we'll address the issue. So it is not just those who are committing the offense. We have to look at the cause of the problem. And from my own perspective, the government needs to do more in trying to address the problem of, let's say, unemployment, which is a part of the problem, because if these youths are gainfully employed, they may not want to go into cultism. So parents also have to do more in trying to bring up their children in such a way that they will be responsible in the society. So everybody is involved in one way or the other. So we have to look into the root cause of this problem and see how it can be addressed. And when it is addressed, we see that cultism will be reduced to the barest minimum. So we haven't done so much to stop this menace in the society. We need to do more.
Well, Ifeoma, thank you so much for joining us on Breakfast Central this morning. We're so delighted to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so that was Ifeoma Ben. She's the principal partner at Eminence Solicitors, and we're talking about the anti-cultism bill that has been passed by the Lagos State House of Assembly, but is still awaiting the assent of the governor. An interesting conversation there. Does the bill mention sponsorship? Those who are sponsoring the cults, does it mention avenues? So I think while we want to attack and get punishment at this high level, are we as a society adequately redressing and addressing why we're seeing our young boys and girls in cults in the first place?
Many might play devil's advocates and say, okay, that's why they are going after the parents, punishing parents for convicted. It
is hard to be you can do everything right, and let me tell you, your child can still turn out wrong.